Yo Bar, what's up and what's happening, and welcome back to It's the Yo Bar series with me, Chris Harding. So the other day I was talking to a client about their nutrition and they said something quite profound to me. He said, how am I supposed to know how to eat better when I don't know as much as you know? And I thought, well, obviously you're not going to know as much as I know because that's the thing that I'm studied in, and that's the thing that I research, and that's the thing that I coach other people to do. And that got me thinking, how would I give everything that I know to you in a very short format such as this video? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a very brief history of our food and where it comes from. And then I'm going to make a comparison with our food to our medicine and go back in time and then come forward all the way up to the present day. And then try to summarize that as to how we can better our health moving forward. So we probably don't think about this in our day-to-day living, but actually cells have been metabolizing energy for billions and billions of years, right from when the Earth was probably first formed. And the very first microbes that were found on Earth would have consumed very simple forms of energy. Prehistoric bacteria or microbes would have used things such as hydrogen sulfide and carbon monoxide as forms of energy. And then, slightly later on, early bacteria would have learned to photosynthesize, so basically gathering energy from the sun and turn that energy into very basic, simple sugars, which we call glucose. Prehistoric bacteria would have also used things such as minerals, metals, and basic trace elements as forms of energy. And over time, what that consumption of that type of mineral would have led to is huge deposits of ore, such as iron ore, left all over the world. And that would be a big stage in how the Earth was formed and developed. Now, the most important thing that I want you to take from this video is how our ancient ancestors and ancient bacteria strived to consume energy. And that was its main purpose, obviously to procreate, but also to survive by finding energy. And it found energy in any possible way that it could, even from things such as the sunlight to be able to photosynthesize. So the main thing I want you to remember here is the word energy and how important that energy is to us. So if we skip forward a few 100 million years from our ancient bacteria all the way up to species such as dinosaurs, plants, and then eventually mammals, we then sort of see two groups split. So the first group would have been a carnivore and the second group would have been a herbivore. Those two groups would have, one, eaten plants and two, eaten other animals or other species to be able to survive. Again, the key element is energy. Either a herbivore or a carnivore would have hunted or scavenged or perhaps even grazed for their food. But again, it's the acquiring of energy that's the most important thing. So if we skip forward another few million years, we'd then start to see the stages of the mammal appear, and within those mammals would have been the early Homo sapien. And the Homo sapien would have been exactly the same as all other mammals. It would have found food, it would have hunted or scavenged for food to be able to consume energy. Now, energy is split into two different parts. You either use energy or you store energy. And that's very much what they would have done. That's where that idea of sort of feasting and famine comes from, is that they would have hunted, they would have stored that energy, they'd have used it for some things, and their bodies would have stored it for others. And so our ancient microgut biome and also our ancient hormones would have been developed around that very principle of gathering and hunting for food to be either consumed for energy expenditure or preservation, so to preserve energy, which is why we have body fat. So where Homo sapiens slightly veer off from other mammals is that the Homo sapien learns how to cook and prepare its food, and we still are the only mammal to this day that has ever done that across the entire history of anything that's ever lived. We are the only species that's ever cooked and prepared our food, and that's because we found that we could preserve our food, which is very important, so we could store it for later, and also that we could steer away from things such as bacterial infections or anything that would have been in our food that could have possibly poisoned us. cooking our food, heating our food, would have been one of the main reasons why we were able to develop into what we are today. So after a time, the Homo sapien veered even further away from other mammals. And this is because we then created agriculture. So we started to farm the land, we started to grow grain, we started to cultivate livestock and use that livestock to help us to develop even further. And again, this would have been another huge step for the Homo sapien and human evolution to go forward. So from that early dawn of our agriculture, where we started to farm our food, it pretty much remained that way for thousands of years. However, roughly about 120 to 130 years ago, due to the Industrial Revolution, we'd have found a way to start to process our food a little bit further on, which hadn't really happened before. So from agriculture all the way up to roughly, let's just say 120 years ago, we would have just prepared our food, and we'd have created things such as recipes, and there would have been a form of processing because obviously we had things such as cheese and yogurt, and we invented other ways to manipulate grain, such as things such as pasta and bread. And they are forms of processing, but they're very basic, kind of almost primitive forms of processing our food. It wasn't until about 120 years ago, from the Industrial Revolution, that we actually started to process our food to a much, much more refined volume, which meant that we could store it for much longer. Now, if you look back to the Industrial Revolution, that would have been the dawn of when we'd have started to refine our food and process it to a much higher degree. So that's basically a very simple timeline when it comes to our food. We go back to ancient bacteria, and it would have used things such as metals, minerals, and trace elements, and photosynthesizing energy from the sun to be able to create energy. And again, like I say, energy is very much the key factor of this video, all the way up to today, where I feel that we have two categories. There's processed food and ultra processed food, and then we've got whole food. With ultra processed food and processed food, these things are very much pushed in front of us. They're marketed to us in a way that I believe affects our psychology to the way we think about food. And then you've got whole foods, and within those whole foods you can include basic principle processing such as yogurt and cheese, and even things such as cooking and creating from whole foods such as recipes. So let's go to another timeline and let's look at our medicine. So ancient medicine would have been things such as using extracts from plants, even very basic primitive opioids. And then you look at things such as medieval ways to alleviate pain and discomfort and possibly even illness by bleeding the patient out or using leeches to clean the blood. These would have been things that they'd have used to try and cure and to treat people who are suffering from either disease or illness, even things such as cancer. Now, if we move forward probably a few hundred years down the evolution of our medicine, we would start to see that we're learning how to clean better. We're keeping our environment clean, and that is actually having a knock-on effect to be able to depress the amount of infections and spreading of bacteria. So individuals such as Florence Nightingale would have been pioneers in her time, where she'd have realised that keeping sickness bays and hospitals cleaner would have reduced the amount of infection. So that's another big step for us. That's another big step in understanding how we are able to live for much longer periods of time, because cleanliness and the reduction of infection and bacteria is a part of our medicine. It's a part of our treatment. Then slightly later on from that, you then start to see the uprising of things such as penicillin, and again using pharmaceutical treatments. And again, this relates to the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution would have allowed for people such as chemists, pharmacists, and even doctors to start to prescribe and use chemicals to be able to cure ailments, our sicknesses, our diseases, to whatever degree they could at that time. And again, from the Industrial Revolution, we would have been able to develop techniques to manufacture medicine on a much higher and grander scale. Now, originally, that probably would have been to our benefit because we were able to treat more people. But now, when we look at 2024, where we are today, we've kind of got a little bit of a problem with our medicine. Our mindset, in my belief, behind medicine is to use it as the answer to everything. And I'll give you an example. I was talking to a potential client that I didn't actually work with, and he was a diabetic, and he came to me and he said, I'd like to talk about the coaching that you do for type 2 diabetes. And I sort of, asked him some basic questions and things like that. And it very quickly became apparent that he was kind of the mindset that, well, I'm just going to use medicine, which is things like such as metformin, to be able to control my type 2 diabetes. I don't need to change my diet. I just need to take this pill. And that's where I feel these two timelines, one of our food and the other of our medicine, start to merge together. If you go all the way back to the turn of the previous century, so let's say from 1899 to 1900 and all the way up through from then, you start to see that our processing of our food and our processing of our medicine start to go hand in hand, and our illness starts to go further and further up. Now, what illnesses? Well, our illnesses, when it comes to food, are related to our metabolism, and they're also most likely related to the health of our gut. So when it comes to a broken metabolism or someone's metabolism that isn't as strong as it could be, it's what I call a broken metabolism, and that's due to the lifestyle, food, and stresses that we have in daily life. So what are these diseases? These diseases are things such as type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, potential atherosclerosis, which is heart attacks and strokes. Even things such as dementia and cancer are also diseases of the metabolism. But more and more, we're using chemicals to be able to try to fix these issues. Whereas actually, if you look at the ancient bacteria, and if you look at the Homo sapien, which is us, we're actually bio, we're not chemical. Our bodies produce chemicals and it uses chemicals, and we do respond well to medication. As a disclaimer, this certainly is not a video to revolt against medication. Medication is very much there as a tool to be able to help us to get better, and it's always been because of that. However, I very much feel now that there's a mindset of people where it's so much easier to just say, I'll just take a pill. I'm just going to take the pill and not address the actual real issue. And the real issue is that our food is poisoning us, and we're then using our very highly refined medicine to be able to try and to treat and cure these problems, these metabolic problems. But actually, if you look at it, our medicine doesn't cure anything. So, for example, metformin, which is used for type 2 diabetes, doesn't cure type 2 diabetes. It postpones it. That's all it does. It's the same as chemotherapy for cancer patients. When you take chemotherapy, it doesn't cure cancer. It just refines it down to a place where the individual or the patient can actually live some quality of life, but most likely will have to continue on some form of hormone or some form of drug to prevent the cancer from growing and spreading again. And I'm not saying that all diseases are based around our food, but I do feel when you look at the scope of things, you go back to the turn of the last century, so let's say 1900 just as a round figure, all the way up till now, processing and our manufacturing has got bigger and bigger and bigger. It's grown and grown and grown. You can see it in the pharmaceutical industry, and you can see it in the marketing of our processed foods. It's all marketed to us to make us believe that it's good for us. It's the best thing for us, that they have got, our best interests at heart, when it's not true. What is true is that for the processing of food and also the high manufacturing of drugs, is there to make a sale. They are there to make money. It is a product. When you're consuming processed food, when you're eating processed food, you are eating something that's a product to the person who sold it to you and nothing else. And yes, of course, you can take that back to a basic, simple baker who bakes bread in the morning and then sells it. But it's not as highly processed. The ingredients to make bread are very few. But when you buy bread from a supermarket shelf and you look at the ingredients, it has preservatives, emulsifiers, deodorants, additives, and the list goes on, to be able to preserve that bread on that shelf for longer periods of time. And that's all due to that turn of the century industrial revolution, where we figured out that we could actually process food and refine it to a much, much higher degree, and therefore be able to use it and cheapen it. So what I want you to take from this video is the basic principle that you go all the way back to our ancient bacteria, our ancient ancestry, even all the way back to sort of pre-agriculture. We would have just been consuming forms of food to be able to use energy or store energy. And that's the basic principle. Now, obviously, for a human, we have evolved much, much further than any other mammal or any other living thing in the history of time. However, to our detriment, we've been able to manufacture it so well that we're now actually starting to poison ourselves. And so whenever you're consuming food, whenever you're looking at your diet, I'd always say this: I'm trying to consume energy. That's all I'm basically doing. Is why you get hungry. You have these ancient hormones and these ancient chemicals inside your body that are triggered when you're feeling hungry, when you're feeling tired, when you're feeling stressed. And so when a hormone is triggered that you're feeling hungry and it goes to a processed or ultra-processed food, you've got to remember that that processing has come from a history of manufacture that was, like I say, again, started in the Industrial Revolution. But it's very important to remember the basic principle that you are just looking to consume energy. And when you realize that, or hopefully what I think when you realize that, is that actually I can choose something else. I don't have to choose this processed food. I can choose something which is a little bit better for me, a little bit more wholesome and original. So it doesn't have the high stages of processing and manufacturing that a processed food would have. I'm not saying that processed food is the reason why we're all ill. And I'm certainly not saying that we should stop taking medication. I'm not an advocate for that. But what I want to wrap this video up with is the fact that I feel that the better the food we eat, the more active our lifestyles, and that includes our mental health as well, the less we'll need to rely on medication as a tool. In my eyes, medication is a tool to help an individual to get better, but it is not something that we should use as the be-all and end-all of health. Our be-all and end-all of health is very much our own responsibility in terms of the things that we choose to eat and in terms of the things that we choose to do, and whether we need to use medication on advice of our doctors and, specialists. And we use those tools to be able to live a long, prosperous and valuable life. So guys, I hope you found this video useful, and also remember to drop a comment in the comment section below, and I promise that I will get back to you. Please like this video and also subscribe to the channel for more content. Until next time, be fit, be healthy, and of course, be a boss bar.
It's the Yo Boss series.